Sometimes, the simplest things, like our morning cup of coffee, are the most intricate. Coffee beans are actually seeds, and they are the product of a long and complicated journey, involving the work of multiple artisans, that spans multiple continents. Whether you're a budding barista, a home connoisseur, or totally new to coffee, this video will help you better understand coffee's bean-to-brew process. Coffee plants grow in warm climates, usually in countries near the equator. The plants require a specific type of soil, temperature, and altitude to thrive. Coffee bean is the seed of the coffee plant and is made up of the exterior skin, the fruit flesh, the mucilage, and the parchment that surrounds the seed. The mucilage is the gooey layer between the fruit flesh and the outer skin of the seed. All parts of coffee cherries play a vital role in the flavor and quality of the coffee beans both during the growing period and during processing. There are two main types of coffee beans: Arabica and Robusta. Arabica. This is the most popular type of coffee bean, accounting for about 60% of the world's coffee production. Arabica beans have a sweeter, more complex flavor and aroma compared to Robusta beans. They are also lower in caffeine content, with about 1% to 1.5% caffeine by weight. Arabica beans are grown in higher altitudes, with ideal growing conditions being at 1,200 to 2,100 meters above sea level. Robusta beans are hardier and easier to cultivate than Arabica beans. They have a stronger, more bitter taste and aroma, and contain about 2.7% to 4% caffeine by weight. They are typically grown in lower altitudes, at around 200 to 800 meters above sea level. There are also other less common types of coffee beans, such as Liberica and Excelsa, but they are not as widely cultivated or consumed as Arabica and Robusta. Coffee cherries, which contain the coffee beans, are harvested by hand or machine. The method used depends on the terrain and availability of labor. Harvesting coffee cherries is an integral link in the bean-to-brew coffee chain. This moment is a turning point in the entire process and can make or break the quality of the product. Up until this point in the growing process, producers have been investing time, finances, and so much more into building the quality of the coffee trees and their produce. With all of that effort and energy invested into the coffee cherries, it is so important to preserve that quality. After harvesting, the coffee cherries need to be processed to extract the beans. There are two main methods of processing, the washed process and the dry process. Washed coffees are processed with the use of water from the very start. The coffee cherries enter into a system that uses water and mechanical agitation to sort out denser materials, such as stones and twigs, while removing the fruit flesh and mucilage from the seeds. The seeds are then fermented in water for anywhere between 10 hours to 48 hours. Of course, there are producers that work outside of these generalizations. The coffee seeds are then laid out to dry in raised beds or on a patio. Sometimes the drying process is done in a temperature and humidity controlled environment so as to ensure a specific water content for the final product. After processing, but before roasting, coffee is called green coffee or simply green. Dry process coffees, also known as natural process coffees, are very different from washed process coffees. The dry process does not utilize water to wash the fruit flesh away but rather leaves the fruit flesh on during the fermentation process. The coffee cherries are laid out to dry immediately without any contact with water for 5 to 10 days. With the fruit still intact, the fermentation process begins. For this reason, dry process coffees tend to have very jammy, fruity flavors. After the fermentation is completed, the dried coffee cherries are brittle enough to undergo hulling without any water contact. Instead, the dried fruit flesh is removed with dry mechanical agitation. As with any other process, the coffee is sorted and bagged before exporting. The roasting process is a mixture of art and science. Roasting coffee is a different process for every bean. Just like with baking bread or cakes, with every different recipe come different ingredients and bake time. A dry processed Rwandan coffee will roast very differently than a washed processed Colombian coffee. It is the roaster's responsibility to learn how to predict these differences and create unique recipes, or roast profiles, for every coffee. In general, the actual roasting process requires green beans to be loaded into a large drum within which heat is applied as the beans rotate in the drum. The roaster dictates the temperature throughout the process and controls the speed and time of the roast. These factors combine to create different types of roasts and different flavors in the final bean. For example, a short roast at a higher temperature will produce an intense and smoky dark roast, whereas a longer roast at lower temperatures will produce a more complex light roast. At last the roasted coffee has arrived at the cafe or in your very own kitchen. It's time to brew. But where to begin? There are so many possibilities when it comes to brewing coffee. Will you choose a pour-over? A French press? An automatic drip or, perhaps, cold brew? There are so many options for a reason. Each coffee shines differently and some are better suited for certain brew methods. Next time you bring home a coffee from your local roaster, try out different brew methods and ratios to see what you enjoy the most. We also recommend grinding your coffee at home. Whole bean coffee retains its freshness and quality much longer than pre-ground coffee. With your own grinder, you can adjust your grind setting to suit each unique brewer.